Welcome back, everyone, to Book on Srila Prabhupada Instructions on Education. I'm Avery.
And I'm Aiden. It's so good to be here with you all again for another, really important discussion.
Absolutely, Eden. Today, we're going to embark on a truly profound journey, a deep dive, if you will, into Srila Prabhupada's incredible instructions on education. And, it's something that I think is just so relevant to our world today.
Oh, definitely. When we talk about education, I think most people immediately think of like schools and colleges, degrees, careers. But Srila Prabhupada's vision, it's just so much broader, so much deeper than that, isn't it? It really challenges our conventional understanding.
It truly does. He really peeled back the layers to show us what genuine education is all about. Not just, accumulating facts or skills for a job, but something that actually transforms us from within. Something that, gets to the very core of our being.
Yeah, and I think what's particularly striking about his instructions is how they highlight the stark contrast between what he termed materialistic education and a truly spiritual approach to learning. It's almost two completely different paradigms, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Materialistic education, from his perspective, often, just ends up entangling us further in the temporary world, whereas spiritual education aims to liberate us. It's a fundamental difference in the very purpose and goal of learning.
And, in this episode, we're really going to set the stage for understanding those differences. We'll explore why, according to Srila Prabhupada, much of what passes for education today actually falls short, significantly short, of preparing us for life's ultimate realities.
It's going to be a fascinating discussion, one that I think might just shift some perspectives on what it truly means to be educated. We'll look at the roots of modern educational systems and how they perhaps unwittingly reinforce certain worldviews.
Yeah, and how those worldviews might, you know, subtly influence our youth and really all of us, actually, in ways we might not even realize. So get ready to think differently about education, about its purpose, and about its ultimate outcome.
Exactly. It's a conversation that's long overdue, I think, and we're so glad you're joining us for it. Let's dive right in. So, Eden, as we really delve deeper into Srila Prabhupada's teachings on education, one of the first things that really stands out is his observation about the age we live in. He actually describes it as the age of hypocrisy and quarrel.
Yeah, it's quite a strong statement, isn't it? He says this age is very unfavorable for the culture of spiritual life. And when you think about it, given what we see in the world, it kind of makes sense. It's not exactly a conducive atmosphere for spiritual advancement.
No, it really isn't. And he attributes that in large part to the numerous misconceptions that exist about the very purpose of life, and humanity's relationship to God. It's almost like the foundational understanding is missing.
Precisely. And this leads us to like a really critical point about modern education. Srila Prabhupada notes that most institutions of education today, especially, public and government-funded schools, they pretty much embrace the philosophy of humanism.
Right, humanism. And it's interesting because on the surface, it might sound, sort of benign or even noble. But from a spiritual perspective, it has quite a different impact. He says these humanistic doctrines have effectively poisoned the minds of the youth.
Yeah, poisoned their minds, actually, to think that the main goal of life is just sense gratification instead of, using our knowledge-gathering senses for self-realization. It's all about, like, immediate pleasure and worldly pursuits. It's a fundamental shift in purpose.
Exactly. And it's not just about prioritizing sense gratification. It's also, I guess, linked to this atheistic philosophy that underpins a lot of modern thought. This philosophy, he explains, teaches that there's no ultimate supreme God. no origin or controller of the material creation.
Yes, it essentially posits that human beings, individually and collectively, must just, rely entirely on their own powers of reason, logic, and scientific knowledge to solve life's problems. And it completely disregards any dependence on religion or like God-centered beliefs. It's very self-reliant in a way.
Right. And if we look at it, humanism in this context really advocates for secularism, doesn't it? It's all about the pursuit of sensual pleasures, and it really asserts the independence of man from any supernatural god. It's, man is the measure of all things.
And the implications of that are pretty vast. Srila Prabhupada observed that in this present age, these atheistic philosophies are unwittingly embraced by almost 3/4 of the world's population. And, the numbers are increasing. It's not a niche idea anymore.
That's a staggering figure, isn't it? 3/4 of the world's population. And he goes on to say that even among those people who actually profess belief in God, many still conceptualize God in an impersonal and quasi-atheistic way. So it's not even a firm personal understanding.
It's almost like a watered down or perhaps a distant concept of God rather than a dynamic personal relationship. It's really interesting because, modern education, especially in places like public schools in the USA, is explicitly based on this secular humanistic philosophy.
Absolutely. And this philosophy, as we mentioned, prides itself on being not theistic. It doesn't accept supernatural views of reality, like the belief in an all-powerful God at the origin of creation. It's really very human-centered.
Yeah, it's all about using individual reason, logic, and science to understand how to live an ethical and humane life. It's inherently man-oriented, not God-oriented. And the ultimate goal, as it's presented, is just, to make materialistic life better for everyone.
Which, again, on the surface, sounds appealing, doesn't it? This idea of making life better for everyone. But Srila Prabhupada calls these sugar-coated sophistry and false platitudes. He says they're a fool's paradise of deception. Pretty strong words there.
Yeah, they are. Because he's saying that anyone educated in such a system is, in a way, indoctrinated with atheistic ideas. It promotes this false concept of mankind's independent existence from God, and that, he argues, leads to quite a dangerous path.
Indeed, this alienation from God, this sense of independence, it results in developing a purely material conception of life. And this, he explains, can lead one down a gradual downward spiral.
From piety to sinful life, from rational and ethical life to irrational and unethical life, from self-restraint to self-indulgence, from love to lust, from a peaceful mind to a disturbed mind, and ultimately from decency to depravity. It's quite a trajectory he describes there.
So effectively, this modern education, rather than elevating consciousness, actually subtly conditions youth to disregard the spiritual dimension, focusing solely on the temporary and material aspects of existence, thereby fostering these significant misconceptions about life's true purpose. It's quite a sobering thought.
It really is. It sets the stage for why Srila Prabhupada's approach to education is just so radically different.
So we just talked about how modern education seems to inadvertently promote this humanistic, sort of atheistic worldview. But, in stark contrast to all of that, there's Vedic education, which offers a completely different, a truly holistic framework.
Yeah, absolutely. Vedic education, it's not just about getting a degree or learning specific skills for a job. It's described as this profound process where you gain both spiritual and material knowledge. And, it's about nurturing values and habits, all designed to lead to genuine self-realization.
Right. Self-realization. And ultimately, it's about culminating in pure love of God. It really stresses that this entire learning journey should be guided by bona fide spiritual masters, which is quite a different approach from what we typically see today.
It's a completely different paradigm, isn't it? And Srila Prabhupada, he was very direct about this. He really highlighted what he called the defect of contemporary education. It's a very strong term, defect.
He certainly didn't mince words. He specifically noted this in a letter to Ajahn Das on December 4th, 1975. He was really pleased that Ajahn Das was trying to preach seriously in schools and colleges, but then he immediately pointed out this fundamental flaw.
And that flaw, according to him, was that children are being taught all sorts of nonsense things. And the real tragedy, the profound neglect, is that they're not receiving what he called even the first point of knowledge.
The first point of knowledge, which he says is that I am a pure spirit soul, part and parcel of God. I mean, think about that. If that's the foundational knowledge that's missing, then everything else built on top of it, what does it really amount to?
It's like building a house without a proper foundation, isn't it? He emphasizes that everyone is, just interested in the body, and he uses this really interesting analogy from the Bhagavad Gita, comparing the body to a dress.
Yes, he quotes, as a person puts on new garments, giving up the old and useless ones, similarly, the soul accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. That's from Bhagavad Gita 2.22. It's such a simple yet profound way to explain the temporary nature of the body.
It really is. And he then says, this simple fact they have yet to learn. So if we can teach them just this one point about the soul, he feels it will be a great success because, well, this is the basic platform of advancing in spiritual understanding. It's the ABCs of spiritual life.
The absolute basics, right? Like, if you want to read and write, you have to learn your ABCs first. Similarly, for spiritual understanding, you need to know you're not the body. He went on to say that whatever knowledge people have now, it's just on the platform of this body, which is a lump of matter only.
Yeah, and he points out that there's no knowledge of the soul, which is entrapped within the lump of matter. And because of this profound ignorance of this simple, fundamental point, people are suffering. It's the root cause of so much distress, actually.
It really ties back to what we were discussing earlier about the world being an age of hypocrisy and quarrel, doesn't it? If the very purpose of life is misunderstood because we don't know who we truly are, then everything else follows from that misconception.
Precisely. So really, the defect of modern education, as Srila Prabhupada sees it, is that it distracts children with all sorts of material information and skills, but it utterly fails to impart the most essential knowledge, the spiritual identity of the self.
Which, ironically is the only knowledge that can lead to genuine freedom from suffering and ultimate happiness. It's a complete inversion of what true education should be, in his view.
Yeah, and he asserts that it's only through a spiritual process of self-realization under the guidance of a bona fide guru that one can actually attain this real self-realization. So modern education, in its current form, is essentially steering people away from that path.
It's a powerful critique, and it really makes you reevaluate what we prioritize in our educational systems, doesn't it? Like, what's truly valuable to learn and what's just, nonsense things, as he put it, that distract from the real purpose of life.
It certainly does. It challenges us to look beyond the superficial and consider the deeper existential questions that modern schooling often just brushes aside.
So, carrying on from that point about self-realization, the text really drives home that the first step, the absolute foundation, is discerning the eternal soul from this temporary, constantly changing body. It's like, understanding that you're not just the clothes you wear, but the person inside them.
Exactly. It's such a crucial distinction, isn't it? Because if you don't even know who you truly are, how can you aim for any kind of meaningful self-realization? The body It's always, changing, deteriorating, but the soul is eternal.
And to really illustrate this point, the book gives us a pretty striking example of a man named Abdul Sattar. He's an Afghan man. And get this, he's 105 years old. 105.
Wow, that's quite the age. What's his story?
Well, he lives in the Panjshir Valley in Afghanistan, and he's still working every day from dawn to dusk, collecting firewood and cutting stones to build houses. He's been married twice. His first marriage was at 35, and he had 2 sons and a daughter.
Okay, that's impressive for his age to be still so active.
It really is, but here's where it gets particularly interesting for our discussion. When he was 75, he married again, and he had 6 boys and 2 girls with his second wife, who was a teenager when he married her.
Goodness. So even at a very advanced age, he was still very much engaged in expanding his family.
Precisely. And the text notes that Sattar has actually stated he wants to have more children, but his current wife, who's now 50, has refused. And he insists, I still worship her. Every day I look at her and want to marry her all over again.
That's a fascinating detail. It really highlights how strong those material desires can be, even in old age. The text says he appears to have the mental and physical aptitude of men half his age, which is quite something.
It's truly remarkable, isn't it? This example of Abdul Sattar, it directly contradicts the idea that, material desires necessarily decrease with age. On the contrary, his story, it shows that the material yearnings for passionate relationships of youth persist in the mind in old age.
Yeah. And it's not just the desire for relationships, but also the reminiscences of past experiences of sense gratification. And, these persistent desires, they continue to drive sensuality. It's almost as if the mind holds on to these mental pictures of past nostalgic relationships, even up to the moment of death.
Which, according to the text, is a significant point, because that very lingering of material desires, that mental picture, will result in the person taking birth again in a material body and repeat the cycle of birth, old age, disease, and death.
So Sattar, despite his advanced physical age, is still surcharged with material desires for sense gratification. And the text emphasizes that these desires and the overwhelming propensity for sensuality will go with him to his next birth. It's a very clear, if stark, illustration of cause and effect.
It really underscores how attachment to these desires perpetuates this cycle of birth and death, doesn't it? It's not about the body getting old and giving up these desires. It's about the soul's attachment that carries over.
Exactly. And this is why that first step of self-realization, differentiating the eternal soul from the temporary body, is so absolutely foundational. Without understanding that distinction, we remain essentially bound by these material yearnings, repeating the same cycle.
It makes you think about all the education we receive that focuses on, prolonging life or enhancing physical comfort, but completely overlooks this deeper reality of persistent desires and the eternal nature of the self. It's a profound oversight.
It really is. And the example of Sattar, it serves as a powerful reminder that true liberation or lasting happiness isn't found by fulfilling an endless stream of material desires, because those desires, they just keep coming back regardless of how old the body gets.
Precisely. It sets the stage for what comes next, which is understanding consciousness itself as a symptom of the soul. Because if desires are persistent and tied to the soul, then consciousness must be too, right? So carrying on from that point about self-realization, the text really drives home that the first step, the absolute foundation, is discerning the eternal soul from this temporary, constantly changing body. It's like, Understanding that you're not just the clothes you wear, but the person inside them.
Exactly. It's such a crucial distinction, isn't it? Because if you don't even know who you truly are, how can you aim for any kind of meaningful self-realization? The body, it's always, changing, deteriorating, but the soul is eternal.
And to really illustrate this point, the book gives us a pretty striking example of a man named Abdul Sattar. He's an Afghan man, and get this, he's 105 years old. 105.
Wow, that's quite the age. What's his story?
Well, he lives in the Panjshir Valley in Afghanistan, and he's still working every day, from dawn to dusk, collecting firewood and cutting stones to build houses. He's been married twice. His first marriage was at 35, and he had 2 sons and a daughter.
Okay, that's impressive for his age to still be so active.
It really is. But here's where it gets particularly interesting for our discussion. When he was 75, he married again. And he had 6 boys and 2 girls with his second wife, who was a teenager when he married her.
Goodness, so even at a very advanced age, he was still very much engaged in expanding his family.
Precisely. And the text notes that Sattar has actually stated he wants to have more children, but his current wife, who's now 50, has refused. And he insists, I still worship her. Every day I look at her and want to marry her all over again.
That's a fascinating detail. It really highlights how strong those material desires can be, even in old age. The text says he appears to have the mental and physical aptitude of men half his age, which is quite something.
It's truly remarkable, isn't it? This example of Abdul Sattar, it directly contradicts the idea that, material desires necessarily decrease with age. On the contrary, his story, it shows that the material yearnings for passionate relationships of youth persist in the mind in old age.
Yeah, and it's not just the desire for relationships, but also the reminiscences of past experiences of sense gratification. And, these persistent desires, they continue to drive sensuality. It's almost as if the mind holds on to these mental pictures of past nostalgic relationships, even up to the moment of death, which according to the text is a significant point, because that very lingering of material desires, that mental picture, will result in the person taking birth again in a material body and repeat the cycle of birth, old age, disease, and death. So Sattar, despite his advanced physical age, is still surcharged with material desires for sense gratification. And the text emphasizes that these desires and the overwhelming propensity for sensuality will go with him to his next birth. It's a very clear, if stark, illustration of cause and effect.
It really underscores how attachment to these desires perpetuates this cycle of birth and death, doesn't it? It's not about the body getting old and giving up these desires. It's about the soul's attachment that carries over.
Exactly. And this is why that first step of self-realization, differentiating the eternal soul from the temporary body, is so absolutely foundational. Without understanding that distinction, we remain essentially bound by these material yearnings, repeating the same cycle.
It makes you think about all the education we receive that focuses on, prolonging life or enhancing physical comfort, but completely overlooks this deeper reality of persistent desires and the eternal nature of the self. It's a profound oversight.
It really is. And the example of Sattar, it served as a powerful reminder that true liberation or lasting happiness isn't found by fulfilling an endless stream of material desires, because those desires, they just keep coming back, regardless of how old the body gets.
Precisely. It sets the stage for what comes next, which is understanding consciousness itself as a symptom of the soul. Because if desires are tied to the soul, then consciousness must be too, right? So we just talked about how persistent material desires are, regardless of physical age. And that brings us actually to a deeper dive into consciousness itself. Because, well, if desires are tied to the soul, then consciousness must be too, right?
Absolutely. The text really emphasizes this point. That consciousness is a direct symptom of the soul. It makes a very simple observation. When a person is alive, there's consciousness. When they die, it's gone. The body is still there, but it completely lacks consciousness.
Yeah, it's like if you pinch your arm, you feel pain. But if you pinch a dead body, there's no reaction. That feeling of pain or pleasure, that's the proof that a living being has consciousness. And it's individually experienced too. I can't feel your pain and you can't feel mine.
Right. And this leads to a really crucial distinction that the book makes. Consciousness is not a product of combining material elements or chemicals, because if it were, then, scientists should be able to just inject some organic chemicals into a dead body and bring it back to life. But they can't.
Yeah, they can measure and quantify all the chemicals in a living body, but they still can't revive a dead one. And why is that? Because as the text explains, the person isn't just the temporary body. The true identity is the eternal, non-material soul that's simply covered by the temporary body.
It's a profound thought, isn't it? It's not the material body itself that experiences pain or pleasure. If you pinch a dead body as hard as you like, it feels nothing. The body may appear to be a living mass of chemicals when it's alive, but it's conscious only because of the non-material soul's presence.
Exactly. And the text quotes Srila Prabhupada saying that whatever knowledge they have got now is on the platform of this body, which is a lump of matter only. There is no knowledge of the soul which is entrapped within the lump of matter, and so people are suffering because of ignorance of this simple point.
Which brings us to the core of self-realization. The book describes it as a spiritual process that allows one to actually attain self-realization, especially under the tutelage of a bona fide guru. And it outlines really 3 pivotal steps to get there.
So the first step, which we've kind of touched on, is to differentiate between the eternal soul and the temporary changing body. We saw that with Abdul Sattar, how the desires persist because the soul is eternal, even as the body ages. The soul, unlike the body, is not subject to deterioration or the 6 transformations of birth, growth, producing effects, dwindling, and vanishing.
Yes, the Bhagavad Gita, as quoted in the text, says very clearly, "For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain." That's in Bhagavad Gita 2.20.
And Srila Prabhupada elaborates on this, explaining that the soul is not born, but because he takes on a material body, the body takes its birth. The soul does not take birth there, and the soul does not die. He says that the soul has no past, present, or future. He's eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. It's quite a comprehensive explanation.
It really is. So once we grasp that fundamental difference between the body and the soul, that's the first big step towards self-realization. But then there's the second step, which is discerning the minute individual soul's relation to the infinitely great supersoul.
Oh, yes. The book explains that all living entities are eternally connected to Lord Krishna as his parts and parcels, or fragmented parts. So while the individual soul is unique, Lord Krishna is also a unique individual, but he's the supreme.
Right. It's like we are qualitatively one with the Lord. But due to material contamination, we experience temporary happiness and distress. And this is all due to, forgetting our true qualities, which are equal to the Lord's. The text cites Srimad Bhagavatal 1.13.48 for that.
And Lord Krishna himself confirms this eternality, saying in Bhagavad Gita 2.12, "Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So the individual soul has eternal existence because it's a part and parcel of Krishna.
Which leads us to the third and final step of self-realization, recognizing Lord Krishna as the ultimate origin of all existence. The text really emphasizes this, stating that Krishna clarifies the origin of the soul and matter itself. Everything, both material and spiritual, emanates from him.
And Lord Krishna states it very directly in Bhagavad Gita 10.8. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts.
So essentially, for self-realization, we first understand we are not the body, but eternal souls. Then we understand that we, as individual souls, are eternal fragmental parts of the Supreme Soul, Krishna. And then finally, that Krishna is the ultimate source and origin of everything.
It sounds like a very logical, progressive path, actually, from discerning ourselves to our relationship with the Supreme, and then understanding the Supreme as the ultimate cause. It's quite comprehensive.
It is, and it provides such a clear framework for understanding not just our own existence, but the entire universe. It moves us away from that limited body-centric view that modern education often instills.
Precisely. And this understanding that consciousness is a symptom of the soul and that the soul is eternal and part of the Supreme, it's the bedrock for advancing in spiritual understanding, as the book puts it. Without this basic knowledge, everything else is just, well, a bit nonsensical.
Yeah, it's the ABCs of spiritual life, as it were. You can't read and write without learning your letters, and you can't truly understand life without understanding the soul and its source.
Yeah, it's the ABCs of spiritual life, as it were. You can't read and write without learning your letters, and you can't truly understand life without understanding the soul and its source.
And that, funnily enough, brings us right to this next section, which is titled Krishna Consciousness, the True Goal of Education, and the Perils of Material Knowledge. Srila Prabhupada is very explicit here, stating that Krishna consciousness is the real goal of education and that it's fundamentally different from materialistic learning.
It's almost like a total paradigm shift from what we're, used to thinking about education. The book highlights how he often referred to a poem by Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakura, which really critiques mundane knowledge quite harshly.
It does. It really lampoons it. The first verse of the poem goes, "With great enthusiasm, I spent my time in the pleasures of mundane learning and never worshipped your lotus feet, O Lord. Now you are my only shelter." It's like a confession of misplaced priorities.
Yeah, and then it continues, reading on and on, my hopes grew and grew, for I consider the acquisition of material knowledge to be life's true goal. How fruitless those hopes turned out to be, for all my knowledge proved feeble. Now I know that all such erudition is actually pure ignorance. That's pretty strong language.
Calling material knowledge pure ignorance?
It is. And the third verse really drives home the reason why. It says, all the so-called knowledge of this world is born of the flickering potency of your illusory energy, Maya. It is an impediment to the execution of devotional service to you. Indulgence in mundane knowledge verily makes an ass of the eternal soul by encouraging his infatuation with this temporary world.
Wow, makes an ass of the eternal soul? That's a very vivid image. It really paints a picture of how this kind of knowledge burdens us. The poem continues, here is one person who has been turned into such an ass, who for so long has carried on his back the useless burden of material existence. Now in my old age, for want of the power to enjoy, I find that nothing at all pleases me.
That's really profound. It's talking about the emptiness that comes from a life focused solely on material pursuits, especially when the ability to enjoy those pursuits diminishes with age. The poem then states, life has now become agony, for my so-called erudite knowledge has proven itself to be worthless ignorance. Material knowledge has now become a pointed shaft, and has pierced my heart with the intolerable, burning pain of ignorance.
It really does seem to be about a deep sense of regret and like unfulfillment. And the final verse, it brings it back to the spiritual. It says, "O Lord, there is no treasure worth seeking in this world other than your lotus feet." Bhaktivinoda abandons all his mundane knowledge and makes your lotus feet the sum and substance of his life. So it's a complete turn, right?
Exactly. It's a complete shift in perspective from the agony of material knowledge to the shelter of devotion. And the book mentions that Srila Prabhupada elaborated on this poem in a conversation titled "Modern Education Makes Asses," where he emphasized the, quote, degrading effect of material knowledge prevalent in Western cultures.
Yeah, he really saw it as misleading and ultimately devastating. He talks about how Western culture is like based on increasing sex life and Eastern culture traditionally on how to stop it. He says, without a sex life, one cannot be materially enthusiastic. So if you stop it, you become spiritually advanced. If you indulge, you become materially enthusiastic.
And then he gets into how this leads to ignorance. He says the non-devotees in Western civilization do not know the science of life. Their life means this body. That means they do not know what is life. And as soon as the life is gone, the body is silenced. This is their ignorance. He challenges them, saying why the life is stopped, but they are very proud of the advancement, but cannot stop death. That means the whole basic principle is ignorance.
It's almost like a rhetorical question, right? Like, you have all this knowledge, but you can't solve the most fundamental problem of existence. He cites a verse from Bhagavad Gita saying that those who are bewildered by demonic and atheistic views have their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge all defeated.
He really drives home that point that the pursuit of material knowledge is actually a formidable obstacle to Krishna consciousness. It just increases attachment to the material world, making us act like a beast of burden, working tirelessly for money and sense gratification, completely neglecting spiritual enlightenment.
Yeah, he says people will forget God. With the advancement of so-called material science or material knowledge, the result will be that people will forget God. And then he paraphrases Bhaktivinoda Thakura saying, "This material education will make me more captive, and I shall work just like an ass."
He even throws out a challenge. His charge is that advancement of material education is advancement of the influence of material energy. Can anyone refute Bhaktivinoda Thakura that he is wrong? It's a pretty bold statement, asserting that modern education actually makes us more entangled, not less.
He does, and it brings up an interesting point because a devotee actually protested, saying, but without education, one cannot even read the books Bhaktivinoda Thakura has written.
And Srila Prabhupada's response was classic, actually. He said that reading the books written by bona fide acharyas is real education. He continued, "We want that you to learn from Bhaktivinoda Thakura. You learn from Vyasadeva. You learn from Narada. But why are you learning from Freud, from Darwin, and such rascals?"
He's not holding back there, is he? He says education means you should learn from a person who is authorized, who is without mistake, without illusion, who does not cheat, just like we are learning from Krishna. That is education. And if you learn from rascals and fools, then what is that education? It's a direct challenge to the source of our knowledge.
He really questions the purpose of education. He asks, we are working for this body, which I am not. Is that education or is it cheating? And then gives this analogy. He says, if you say I am taking my interest, I'll say I'm taking water. I wash daily my shirt and coat. And what is that knowledge? And what about you? Your food? I don't care for that. I wash my coat and shirt daily.
So he's saying like you're focused on keeping your outer coverings clean and well maintained, but you're starving the real self, the spirit soul. Is that education? That is not education. And then he circles back to Bhaktivinoda Thakura. He says, so Bhaktivinoda Thakura is right when he says, Jiva ke karai gada, which means this material education means making people more and more asses. That's all. He is already ass because he's in this material world, and the so-called material education means keeping him in that condition more and more.
It's a stark warning, really. That material education, far from liberating us, actually entrenches us further in the cycle of illusion and suffering, transforming us into, as he puts it, asses burdened by a life of temporary desires and false knowledge.
It's a stark warning, really, that material education, far from liberating us, actually entrenches us further in the cycle of illusion and suffering, transforming us into, as he puts it, asses burdened by a life of temporary desires and false knowledge.
And that really sets the stage for what he says next, which is quite shocking, actually, if you're not prepared for it. This section is titled The Slaughterhouse of Modern Schools, Indoctrination and Degradation. And Srila Prabhupada very explicitly condemned public schools as slaughterhouses.
Yeah, he didn't mince words, did he? He asserted they actively spoil children by immersing them in atheistic and speculative theories that deny God's existence and promote self-destructive behaviors. It's a pretty powerful statement to call a school a slaughterhouse.
It really is. He says, and I'm quoting here, "I have seen intelligent boys. They go to school, and he is spoiled. Simply slaughterhouse. This so-called school is called slaughterhouse. Yes, slaughterhouse." He said this in a conversation on September 7th, 1973.
It's like he's saying they're not nurturing true life, but rather destroying spiritual vitality. He also stated in a lecture, the modern educational system without any knowledge of Bhagavan, I may tell you frankly, not only in India, everywhere, they are practically a slaughterhouse. He was very consistent with his view.
Right, and it's not just about the lack of spiritual knowledge, but also the type of knowledge being propagated. The book explains how children are introduced to theories that basically compromise their belief in God, self-restraint, and even mental stability.
Absolutely. It lists things like the Big Bang Theory, Darwin's evolution theory, Freud's theory of sexual repression, and Marx's idea that religion is the opium of the people. These are all presented as, foundational truths without any counterbalance of spiritual understanding.
Exactly. And it goes on to mention how these theories lead to behaviors like becoming gender and sexually fluid, militant feminism, fascist and racist philosophies, and even promotes things like rap, heavy metal, violent movies, pornography, and social media. It basically implies these are all like products of a material-centric education that lacks spiritual grounding.
It's quite the comprehensive list of what he saw as societal degradation stemming from this atheistic educational foundation. The text explains that this all evolves the material conception of life, leading to an increase in lust, anger, greed, illusion, hatred, envy, and madness.
Yeah, it highlights a strong attachment to sense objects, an unregulated lifestyle, and addiction to consciousness-altering drugs. And importantly, it mentions the attachment and self-identification with the material body and mind and ignorance of the soul. That really circles back to what we were just talking about with self-realization.
It does, and it also points out the rejection of authority and spiritual scripture, sense of false proprietorship, false pride, addicted to philosophical speculation and false concepts. It paints a picture of a mind that's completely adrift without a spiritual anchor.
And he also talks about the sheer irrationality of it all. He notes that this education is lacking rationality, such as accepting that nature functions in an orderly way, which permits it necessary for science and a good measure of predictability, denying that there is a supremely intelligent person, God, who has made nature orderly.
That's a fascinating point, isn't it? He's saying that to believe in the orderliness of nature and science, yet deny an intelligent creator,
is completely irrational. He asks, no organized system, whether governmental, commercial, social, or cultural, was achieved randomly without the guidance of intelligent persons. Yet children are taught in school that the creation and the maintenance of nature are happening without any intellect guiding it.
It's a fundamental contradiction he's pointing out there. He calls it, quote, absurd and purposely misleading children to become atheistic, dependent, and exploited consumers, thinking that after death there is nothing, and therefore one should try to enjoy the senses by accumulating as many objects for sense enjoyment and sensual relationships as possible.
So, in his view, this material-centric education isn't just misguided, it's actively harmful. It leads to a, quote, disaster by nasty habits of meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, intoxication, and a life full of anxiety with no understanding of the spiritual potential of eternal life and love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Exactly. The whole point, really, is that without spiritual knowledge, education simply reinforces the temporary, fleeting nature of material existence rather than guiding individuals towards their true, eternal, spiritual identity and purpose. It's a very sobering critique of modern society when you think about it.
So we've just discussed how modern education, in Srila Prabhupada's view, can actually be detrimental, focusing on material existence and, well, frankly, spoiling individuals. But now it's time to shift gears a bit and talk about the alternative, the transformative principle of spiritualizing all knowledge.
Yes, this section is titled Spiritualizing All Knowledge, the Service of Lord Krishna, and it really offers a profound counterpoint to the previous discussion. It's about taking all forms of knowledge, scientific, philosophical, artistic, and utilizing them in the loving service and glorification of Lord Krishna.
That's really the core, isn't it? The text emphasizes that true wisdom, according to Vedic teachings, is knowing Krishna as the absolute truth and acting in ways that affirm his supreme position as the creator and maintainer of everything. It's a complete paradigm shift from the self-centered approach.
It really is. The Srimad Bhagavatam summarizes the purpose of spiritual education, stating that learned circles have positively concluded that the infallible purpose of the advancement of knowledge, namely austerities, study of the Vedas, sacrifice, chanting of hymns, charity, culminates in the transcendental descriptions of the Lord, who is defined in choice poetry. That's from SB 1.5.22.
So it's not about rejecting knowledge entirely, but rather redirecting its purpose. Human intellect, the text says, should be engaged in acquiring knowledge to expertly use all material facilities for serving, understanding, and glorifying Krishna. It's about sanctifying the very act of learning.
Exactly. And following Vedic knowledge, especially what Lord Krishna taught Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, is supposed to help us all attain the perfection of life, leading us to elevation in the spiritual world. Krishna himself says he is the goal of all knowledge. That's Vedescha Sarve Eva Aham Vedyo from Bhagavad Gita 15.15.
Yes. So knowledge isn't an end in itself, but a means to understand and serve the divine. And, the text really highlights how those attracted by the glitter of Maya or illusion are simply incapable of understanding this profound truth because their knowledge is used for sense enjoyment and self-indulgence.
Right. They waste their precious time in sensuality and completely ignore self-realization. The philosophy here is that everything, both material and spiritual, expands from Lord Krishna. He's the primary mover, and his energies are inconceivable.
And that's where spiritual vision comes in. It's about seeing everything in relation to Krishna and nothing independent of him. Materialistic education, on the other hand, teaches us to see everything as separate from the Lord, denying his existence as the creator and ultimate source. It's a fundamental difference in perspective.
Absolutely. The text clarifies that real knowledge is knowing how to use everything in the service of the Lord.
When something is offered to the Lord with love and devotion, it becomes spiritualized. This is also confirmed by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 4.24, which states that one fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom.
And it also means that even material things, when used in the service of the Lord, regain their spiritual quality. It's quite transformative, isn't it? It implies that no activity is inherently mundane if its purpose is aligned with the divine.
Yes, it does. The text continues by saying that a person entertaining the illusory concept that life is just for sense gratification can't understand the absolute truth. Materialistic people see others and things as exploitable commodities, completely missing their spiritual nature.
And that's where Krishna consciousness steps in. It's the process to purify that illusory consciousness, allowing one to perceive the omnipresent spiritual reality. Because, everything is an expansion of Lord Krishna's transcendental energies. Seeing things in relation to him is spiritual vision.
Right, and seeing things as separate from him is material vision. The practical way to transcend these dualities, the text explains, is by continuously engaging in activities pleasing to Lord Krishna. This absorption spiritualizes every aspect of one's life.
Which in turn clears the mind of disturbances caused by material dualities. It's all about becoming convinced that serving Lord Krishna is the ultimate goal of life. With that conviction, one can truly maintain a steady mind and experience continuous peace.
The text strongly states that all spiritual authorities recommend that every branch of knowledge, science, philosophy, physics, chemistry, psychology, should be applied solely in the service of the Lord. Even art, literature, poetry, and painting can be used for glorifying him.
So this is the true purpose of material knowledge. Any other use, the text warns, leads back to that illusory concept of life being for sense gratification. And that results from speculative thinking, where people use knowledge for personal gain and to, exploit others and nature.
Yes, these speculative theories, especially those that deny God's existence, are seen as inventions of people obsessed with personal gain and fame. They want to become like little gods themselves, driven by envy of the Lord.
It's a pretty stark indictment. The correct use of philosophical speculation, then, is to establish Lord Krishna as the supreme truth, sentient and all-powerful. And, the correct use of all knowledge is to use it in his service.
Absolutely. The Bhagavad Gita says, accept the importance of self-realization and the philosophical search for the absolute truth. All branches of knowledge should be engaged in the service of the Lord. Knowledge not engaged in the service of the Lord is ignorance. That's BG 13.12 and the purport to SB 1.5.22.
So the ultimate goal of knowledge isn't just accumulating facts, but understanding that Lord Krishna is the absolute truth, the supreme personality of Godhead. And this is elaborated in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yes, and the book explains that character building through Krishna consciousness is considered scientific knowledge. It's a verifiable method to attain pure love of Krishna, codified by great sages like Narada Muni and Vasudeva. It's seen as a universal science, valid across all spheres of existence because it works for everyone, everywhere.
So, in essence, it's about shifting from an egocentric view of knowledge to a divinely centered one, where everything we learn and do contributes to a higher spiritual purpose. It really, really ties back to the idea of self-realization being the ultimate aim, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It provides a roadmap for how to reorient our entire approach to learning and living so that it elevates us rather than binding us to temporary illusions.
So we've talked about spiritualizing all knowledge and how it's about seeing everything in relation to Lord Krishna. Now let's explore how one actually attains this profound spiritual knowledge. Because, it's not quite like getting a degree from a university, is it?
No, it's definitely not. This next segment, the path to spiritual illumination, devotion, guru, and chanting, clarifies that genuine spiritual knowledge isn't attained through academic study or just mental speculation. It's achieved through unflinching devotion to the Supreme Lord and submissive service to a bona fide spiritual master.
That's a crucial distinction, isn't it? The text emphasizes that one needs to surrender to the Lord through regulated service with devotion under the tutelage of the spiritual master. It's not just about reading books, but about a practical, devoted application.
Precisely. And it states, when the spiritual master is pleased with the sincere service of the devotee, then Lord Krishna blesses the devotee by revealing spiritual knowledge and its correct understanding. It's a very personal and reciprocal process.
It really highlights the importance of the guru, the spiritual teacher in this path. It's not something you can just, figure out on your own through intellectual prowess. There's a verse that supports this. Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatha gurau.
Yes, that verse. It means one who has unflinching devotion for the Supreme Lord and is directed by the spiritual master, in whom he has similar unflinching faith, can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead by revelation. So it's about that deep trust and connection.
And the text goes on to explain that spiritual knowledge is innate. It's something that the living entity originally came to the material world with, but it's been forgotten due to material conditioning. It's not something entirely new that's being introduced, right?
Right. It's more of a recollection or awakening. The experiences from both the spiritual and material worlds are innately present in the mind of the living entity. But because of forgetfulness and the limitations of the material body and mind, we just can't remember. And this is where the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra comes in as a powerful tool. The text says it's possible to become aware of one's spiritual existence through this practice. It's a way to cut through that forgetfulness, really.
It is. The Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, verse 8, confirms this. Abhyasa yoga yuktena, chetasa nanya gamina, paramam purusham divyam, yati partanu chintayan. This translates to, he who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, is sure to reach me.
And Srila Prabhupada elaborates on this, emphasizing the importance of remembering Lord Krishna. He says, one's memory of Krishna is revived by chanting the mantra Hare Krishna. By this practice of chanting and hearing the sound vibration of the Supreme Lord, one's ear, tongue, and mind are engaged. It's a very comprehensive engagement.
Indeed. He describes it as a very easy mystic meditation that helps one attain the Supreme Lord. Even though living entities are part of the Supreme Lord's marginal energy and are, in material contamination, this constant remembrance through chanting is key. Because, they mistakenly think they're the enjoyers, but they're not the supreme enjoyer. The devotee, by constantly thinking of the Supreme Lord in any of his features, Narayana, Krishna, Rama, by chanting Hare Krishna, purifies themselves. And at the end of their life, due to this constant chanting, they'll be transferred to the kingdom of God.
And for this age, the Kali Yuga, the Sankirtan Yagna, which is the congregational chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and eating prasadam, or sanctified food offered to Krishna, are specifically recommended for salvation. It's a very direct and accessible path.
Yes, it's pretty powerful. The text even quotes the Bhagavad Gita 3:11 purport, stating that chanting of Hare Krishna has many benefits, ultimately leading to liberation from material bondage. It also says that by performing yajna and eating sanctified foodstuffs, one's very existence becomes purified, leading to sanctified memory and the ability to think of the path to liberation.
And Srila Prabhupada himself confirms this, saying that chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra can revive our memory of our spiritual origin. He even wrote about it in a letter on November 17th, 1970. It's quite a profound statement about the power of the holy name.
So it's not just a theoretical concept, but a practical, verifiable method for spiritual advancement. The idea that consciousness is purified and spiritual knowledge is revealed through this process of devotion, guru service, and chanting, it's a complete system.
It truly is. It provides a clear, actionable path for anyone seeking to go beyond superficial knowledge and attain genuine spiritual illumination, leading to that higher transcendental taste.
So we've touched upon the idea of spiritual illumination, and it really leads us to thinking about how these principles translate into practical application, especially from a young age. Our next section, Cultivating Transcendental Qualities for Eternal Bliss, dives into how early discipline training in Krishna consciousness can help achieve that.
Yes, that's right. The text emphasizes that children really need to start learning as early as possible about Lord Krishna's wonderful pastimes. It's not just, a nice story, but it's meant to distinguish him as the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead.
And it also outlines a very specific discipline approach. Starting from as young as 5 years old, children need to be trained in a daily schedule of eating, sleeping, bathing, praying, serving the Lord, and learning by hearing and repeating. It's about regulated habits for spiritual advancement, which the text stresses as being of utmost importance.
Absolutely. It highlights the ideal lifestyle for steady spiritual advancement, going to sleep early before 10 p.m. and waking up early about an hour and a half before sunrise. And in those early morning hours, one can hear and chant the glories of God without any disturbance, especially in the company of other sincere devotees.
This reminds me of the example of Narada Muni, who, as a very young child, had this experience. His mother was a maidservant, and Narada had the immense good fortune of serving saintly devotees for 4 months. He benefited from hearing their discourses, offering them service, and even tasting their holy food, prasadam.
It really underscores how this kind of association and disciplined practice leads to the advancement of knowledge. The text says that this is meant to evolve into relishing the transcendental narrations and poetic descriptions of the Lord. That taste for spiritual poetry really attests to the purity of a devotee's love for Krishna.
And speaking of transcendental descriptions, the text points to great poets and writers like Valmiki Muni and Vyasadeva. They completely absorb themselves in describing the Lord's spotless spiritual activities, incorporating philosophy, science, even cosmology without any trace of mundane speculation or advocating for sense gratification.
Exactly. They masterfully used their knowledge to reveal the glorious nature of the Lord. The point is driven home that knowledge not engaged in the service of the Lord is, well, it's considered ignorance, but knowledge used in his service is factual glorification and the most effective way to be liberated from the cycle of birth and death.
So, this spiritual education is truly the key to good character traits, according to the Vedas. It involves 3 main subjects: understanding our relationship with the personality of Godhead, which is sambandha; engaging in regulated devotional service guided by gurus, that's abhideya; and then gradually developing pure love and devotion for Radha and Krishna, ultimately returning to the spiritual world, which is prayojana.
It's a holistic path, isn't it? The importance of training children to be disciplined and live a regulated life for spiritual advancement is paramount. The text reiterates that young boys and girls, when educated by Brahmana gurus in the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna, come into direct contact with him just by hearing these narrations.
And that hearing, it's not just passive. It purifies one's sinful reactions, enabling one to become an associate of the Lord. Children educated in these spiritual topics can really imbibe unlimited knowledge, unfathomable bliss, and eternal life. They learn the art of attentive hearing with a focused mind, while remaining detached from mundane subjects to act as distractions.
It's a stark contrast to modern education, which the text argues totally lacks this spiritual training. It says children are constantly taught mundane subjects and exposed to impersonal atheistic theories that, well, deny God's existence and promote selfish pursuits for sense gratification.
Yeah, it's like by reading all these so-called useless books, they end up believing that the goal of life is just to get money and spend it on their own pleasures. But Vedic education, on the other hand, raises children to the mode of goodness, freeing them from immoral and sinful activities like meat-eating, gambling, intoxication, and illicit sex.
It really helps in developing that power of discrimination between pious and impious activities. Children learn to tolerate all conditions of material existence because they have faith in the Guru and Krishna. And with regulated life, good association, and education based on the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, they become capable of memorizing and understanding profound thoughts and explaining them eloquently.
Ultimately, the goal of spiritual life is to develop transcendent qualities by purifying all those negative influences like lust, anger, greed, envy, madness, and illusion. The text says one can discard these horrible influences by constant engagement in pure Krishna conscious devotional service offered to Lord Krishna.
It's a complete transformation, really, that leads to eternal knowledge and bliss, fulfilling the true purpose of human existence.
So, to wrap up, I think what we've really seen throughout this entire discussion is the incredible transformative power of spiritual education. It's not just about, acquiring knowledge, but it's about purifying our consciousness, discarding those negative influences, and ultimately attaining genuine self-realization and love for the Supreme.
Yeah, exactly. It's about elevating our existence beyond just the material, isn't it? And, truly understanding our eternal nature and our relationship with Lord Krishna. It's a path that really brings ultimate peace and spiritual fulfillment, which is so different from what we're typically taught.
Absolutely. And that spiritual discrimination, the ability to discern what truly matters for the soul's advancement, is really cultivated through these Vedic principles. It's a profound holistic approach to life.
Indeed. And we hope that this deep dive into Srila Prabhupada's instructions on education has been insightful and, perhaps even sparked some new thoughts for all of you listening.
We really appreciate you joining us on this journey today. Thank you so much for tuning in to Book on Srila Prabhupada Instructions on Education.
Before we sign off, we also want to give a special acknowledgement to Harivilas Das. He's the author of this insightful book, Srila Prabhupada's Instructions on Education, which has been our primary source today.
Harivilas Das has a really remarkable journey. He joined ISKCON in 1969 and was initiated by Srila Prabhupada the very next year. He played a crucial role in setting up the first temple in Paris and served as its president.
And, he didn't stop there. He recognized the importance of books in Prabhupada's mission and generously donated to print Srila Prabhupada's books in various foreign languages, really helping to spread Krishna consciousness across the globe.
His efforts, were so impactful, leading to translations and printings in many languages from Bengali to Japanese, Swahili, and even Arabic. He's also been instrumental in organizing major Indian cultural festivals in the Pacific Northwest and establishing educational centers and cow protection farms.
So his contributions are truly significant in spreading these teachings. We're very grateful for his work in compiling and presenting these invaluable instructions.
Indeed. So once again, thank you for listening, and we look forward to having you join us again.